Kim Carr, welcome to ABC News 24. You're promising the car industry $200 million. For what precisely?
We want to lift the level of demand for Australian-made cars. So we're asking governments around Australia to back Australia. We're asking governments around Australia to buy Australian. We're also saying to our own agencies we want to see 100% Australian-made cars in our fleets, unless there is some special exemptions required for particular vehicles.
Because four-wheel drives, people movers aren't made in Australia.
That's right. There are special types of vehicles that we need to have different types of imported vehicles. But we think that as a rule, Australian governments, Commonwealth, state, local government have an obligation to buy Australian. So we want to see a lift in the demand for Australian-made cars, and we're also providing additional support for fleet sales, private fleet sales, and for community organisations and the like to buy Australian.
Don't governments also have an obligation to get the best value for the taxpayer dollar? And aren't there at least some circumstances in which that might mean not buying an Australian car?
Well, our vehicles are high quality, high value, and they are fuel efficient. So the days are gone. Those sorts of excuses have gone. We've got to have an obligation here to our own people, and backing Australian jobs, backing Australian industry is an obligation that all governments share, whether they're local government, state government or at the Commonwealth level.
And is that what the $200 million will pay for?
It will assist also with fleet purchases, for private fleet purchases, and we want to work through the details with the industry about that. So we're providing support for the supply chain, for the smaller companies. There's nearly 200 companies in the Australian automotive industry. We're providing support for sales of vehicles, and we want to make sure that we have a much larger number of cars put through Australian factories.
But you don't know precisely what the support for private fleet sales will be. Isn't the way you put together good policy, find out what they need and then figure out how to fund it?
And that's what we are doing. We are talking to the companies about measures that don't discriminate against any one company or discriminate in favour of any one company, but make sure that we do lift the number of vehicles sold in Australia that are made in Australia.
Isn't this in part making up for the damage done to the car industry by your tightening up the requirements for fringe benefits tax?
No, what we've said is that the level of demand for Australian-made vehicles is its lowest level since 1957. This is a stimulus measure aimed at encouraging people to buy Australian vehicles. The matters in regard to the FBT is entirely separate questions about making the tax system fairer and not using the taxation system to support the importation of cars. Now, what was happening is that under those policies, that loophole, people were using the taxation system to support the private use of their motor vehicles. If you're a businessman or a business, you have business use of your car, you do not lose any benefits under these changes.
But you're booking savings of, I think, about $1.8 billion, so you must be assuming that there are some people not using that correctly and that their ability not to do so anymore will have an impact on the industry.
Well, I think those sorts of claims by some people in the industry are grossly exaggerated. These are measures that don't come in till next year. What we are trying to do is encouraging people to buy Australian and put jobs back into Australian factories and to ensure that we have high-quality Australian-made cars on Australian roads.
Will this be enough to help the car industry? The car industry has been battered, particularly by the high Australian dollar. The dollar has been falling, but we've already seen Ford pull production out of Australia. Holden is in negotiations with workers at its Adelaide plant to find savings, and there are questions about whether the plant could continue if those savings aren't found. Is this package enough?
Well, it's obviously designed to encourage people to buy Australian and to buy Australian cars and put Australian jobs into Australian factories. All of those things are true. But we also have a broader set of measures about future investment decisions, the longer-term investment decisions for the industry. This is an industry that is highly capital intensive. If you want to keep the new technologies coming to Australia, if you want to make sure we continue to produce motor vehicles, you've got to attract new investment. So measures to actually attract $1 billion worth of new investment for the new models for General Motors are separate, and these are questions that the workers at Elizabeth are discussing on Friday. These are people who have long experience in industry, understand how tough it is now, and have taken decisions collectively with the company to make sure that the factory remains viable and make sure the factory remains competitive. So I'm looking forward to the decisions that workers take on Friday. They are giving a commitment to the future of the automotive industry, and we'll be asking companies to give a commitment as well. And we also, as governments, are committed to the future of the automotive industry. The question is, what does the opposition say? What are they doing? Are they committed to the future of Australian automotive manufacturing? Because at the moment, the answer is no.
But aren't they saying they're still saying they will give money to the car industry?
No, they're not.
Just not as much as
No, they're not. They're not saying that at all. They're saying they'll take $500 million out of the automotive industry immediately and refer the matter to the Productivity Commission, which everyone knows is code for ending assistance. In fact, Joe Hockey said that. He said on the 29th of July, no more money for the automotive industry. That means the end of the automotive industry in Australia. That's why this election, 23rd, is the year in which we will make a decision about whether or not we want an automotive industry in Australia. It's a really basic question about the future of manufacturing and manufacturing jobs in Australia.
Why is referring something to the Productivity Commission, why does that mean the end of it? Your government's been quite happy to refer a number of things to the Productivity Commission and implement them. You did that with the disability insurance scheme, you did it with aged care reform. Why couldn't the Productivity Commission come up with a model that might be acceptable?
Mr Hockey's let the cat out of the bag. He said on the 29th of July, no more money. They want to go back to the John Howard policy, which was to end assistance for the automotive industry from 2016. That would see the end of investment in the Australian automotive industry. That would see the end of car making in Australia.
If I could ask you a couple of questions about the election campaign. The Labor Party's slogan is a new way. Doesn't that imply that the old way, which Labor is responsible for, hasn't been working?
No, it implies that we're about the future. We're about making sure we deal with the big challenges facing this country. We're going through a really tough period internationally. We're seeing that we need to face up to the challenges that the world throws at us. And only Labor is capable of leading this country through this period of transition.
You're not walking away from yourselves?
We're not walking away from anything other than our obligation to the Australian people, to defend the Australian people and to make sure that we face up to the challenges facing this country. Now, we think we've got the best plans for the future. We're asking the Australian people to support us in that, and that's what this election will be about the future, not about the past.